Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Equillium's channel, leveraging a deep understanding of immunology and its role in disease to pioneer new products for severe autoimmune and inflammatory disorders. Joining us, we have the privilege of Bruce Steeles, the Chief Executive Officer, who's going to give us an in-depth review of the slide deck, giving us an idea of exactly what's going on with the pipeline and under the hood there at Equillium. So first and foremost, welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me again this morning.
And always a pleasure to get you back on. So I'm going to let you pull up that slide deck and kind of just give us an introductory to the pipeline and exactly where you guys sit.
Sure. Let me go full screen here. Is that in good shape on your end?
That's perfect.
Great, thank you. Well, pleasure to have the opportunity to provide more detail on Equillium and what we're trying to accomplish as a company. We started Equillium with a mission to develop novel, best-in-class therapeutics to treat a variety of diseases of high unmet medical need in the broad field of autoimmunity and inflammation. We're leveraging a very deep base of knowledge around immunology and novel approaches to treating these diseases. We have three drug development programs that fall into sort of two main classes of therapeutics. We're leaders in biology targeting CD6, which is a T-cell specific receptor that plays a central role in autoimmunity and inflammation. This is a drug that we're developing in multiple diseases. We'll take you through those in more detail. And then earlier this year, we acquired a local biotech company in the San Diego area that brought onto the company an underlying discovery platform around targeting multi-cytokines in a single product and two clinical stage assets with that acquisition, and we'll detail those as well. But generally, we're looking to make a significant impact for patients who are suffering from severe diseases. This is a broad look at our pipeline with Itolizumab, our foundational asset, EQ001. This is our anti-CD6 targeted antibody. We currently have this program enrolling in a phase 3 study for the treatment of severe acute graft versus host disease. This is a life-threatening complication for patients who are trying to be cured of an underlying cancer. And this is where that underlying bone marrow transplant will start to attack the patient's own body, which leads to very high morbidity and mortality rates. Today, there are no drugs approved in this first-line treatment setting, which is what we're targeting. We have fast track and orphan drug designation for this program. The second indication where we're currently studying Itolizumab is in lupus nephritis. We recently announced some very compelling data on this program on an interim basis. And this is also an area of very high unmet need, which we'll show in some more detail. We also have fast track designation for this program. In terms of the pipeline expansion we completed earlier this year, we have EQ101, which is a multi-cytokine antagonist of cytokines IL-2, 9, and 15. We have an alopecia areata study that we are ready to commence, and we think this can be a potentially best-in-class approach. You've just seen your first approval of a new drug in this disease area with the JAK inhibitor baricitinib. We also have an IND open for this program for a phase 3 study in CTCL. And then the second program that we acquired, EQ102, is an antagonist against IL-15 and 21. These are cytokines that work synergistically in GI disease. And through targeting that, we think this can be a best-in-class approach to treat patients with celiac disease. So very robust pipeline. We have three drugs in development across multiple indications. In terms of the upcoming catalyst and milestones, next year is going to be a very data-rich year for us, where we expect to have full top-line data from our ongoing Equillium study of patients with lupus nephritis. And then for EQ101, we'll be initiating that alopecia areata study imminently. We expect interim data from that program during next year. And then similarly with EQ102, we've just announced we've started our initial first-in-man study with that program, which will include an opportunity to assess the activity of the drug in patients with celiac disease, with that data also expected during 2023. We'll highlight the programs in a little bit more detail. This is related to Itolizumab, our foundational asset. The reason why this drug is so interesting and promising is the mechanism is highly unique. In a single drug, we can inhibit a certain class of T cells that are responsible for driving a significant amount of disease pathogenesis, and do so in a very specific, focused way. But also the same mechanism can inhibit the trafficking of these cells into tissues. And when you have an immune system or an inflammatory state that is dysregulated, it's because you have this imbalance between the two main sides of the T cell equation, T regulatory cells that regulate the effector cells, that can cause this tissue destruction and damage. And so with our drug, we think we have a therapeutic approach that can be both one that works very rapidly and deeply in terms of the responses, but also can sort of restore that regulation to the immune system and bring it back more into homeostasis and potentially resulting in sort of a disease-modifying effect. So we're very excited about this program. As mentioned, our phase 3 study is an acute graft versus host disease. Today, there are no approved therapies for this first-line indication. Only approved standard of care today is high-dose corticosteroids. And for patients who do not respond to those steroids, the mortality rates are exceedingly high, up to 95% over a 5-year rate. So very severe disease, high unmet medical need, very little approved, only one drug, ruxolitinib, which is a JAK inhibitor, approved in the steroid refractory setting. Our phase 3 study is enrolling. This is a 200-patient study. We'll be looking for complete response rates as our primary outcome at day 29. We're quite excited about this program and the potential to save lives in this disease area. The second indication that we're continuing to pursue with Itolizumab, as mentioned, is in lupus nephritis. This is a very exciting area. We've seen 2 recent drug approvals with a drug called Lupus by Aurinia and Benlysta by GSK. That notwithstanding, lupus nephritis represents about 100 patients in the U.S. with this severe disease that is basically a downstream complication from patients with lupus. Patients who do not achieve responses, and this represents 60% of patients today do not achieve a response on any therapy, will typically go on to severe proliferative disease and end-stage renal disease. So, very debilitating, very high morbidity and some mortality rates here as well. We've seen some very intriguing results from the interim data that we just provided a few weeks ago, where we see overall response rates that are quite broad and complete response rates that are very good as well. And that's shown on our data on the left side of this column. The other 2 columns show sort of current standard of care, and then the more recently approved drug, Lupus, that I mentioned. So you can see sort of how our data is starting to shape up against what's quite well established now from standard of care in the recently approved drugs. And we think we've got a very competitive position here, and the mechanism is also highly differentiated from other drugs in development in this setting. Shifting gears to the recently acquired programs, this is a very interesting approach where in a single drug agent, we can inhibit selectively certain cytokines that can be driving disease pathogenesis, but not do so in a way that is overly broad, which can also often lead to downstream side effects that we've seen extensively with JAK inhibitors. JAK inhibitors are very effective drugs, but they have a lot of cytotoxicities that have led to black box warnings pretty much across the entire class. Nevertheless, this is a very successful class of drugs used broadly in a variety of areas in the oncology and the autoimmune and inflammation setting. And we believe with our peptide-based approach and our multi-cytokine inhibitors, we can provide better targeting. EQ101, which is the most advanced program coming out of this platform, has already been in approximately 90 subjects and shown some very compelling data in patients with cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, where we've seen pretty rapid resolution of the skin-borne disease. Shown on the right is the response rate we've seen from this data set compared to the 2 approved drugs in this field. Again, some very nice early data. We're moving ahead with this program currently in a phase 2 study in alopecia areata. This is some very nice translational data showing our drug compared to ruxolitinib, which is one of the leading JAK inhibitors. And you can see on the far right the type of reduction we're seeing in a much more specific focused manner compared to the broad pathway inhibition you get with JAK inhibitors. So we believe this gives us a reason to think that this could be a best-in-class approach, both from a safety and tolerability standpoint, but also potentially efficacy as well, with the ability to dose higher where we're just targeting the pathway that really is driving disease. As mentioned, you've seen just the first approval here of a JAK inhibitor in this disease, and the pipeline for alopecia areata is largely other JAK inhibitors. So we think commercially there's a high unmet need here, and that we can be very well positioned, and we're looking forward to getting this data during the course of next year. We view this as a very attractive sort of approach for the commercial setting with CTCL, vitiligo as other areas to expand this program. And then the second program, EQ102, this is a multi-cytokine inhibitor targeting IL-15 and 21. We know from published data that these cytokines are key drivers of GI disease. And we've seen very nice synergy. This is published data showing that together IL-15 and 21 have synergistic therapeutic effects. And so we believe we have a drug that's very well positioned and could be a game changer for patients with celiac disease. Now, this represents roughly 1% of the US population have celiac disease where they're sensitive to gluten. Many of these patients suffer. It's very difficult to maintain a gluten-free diet. And currently there are no drugs approved in this therapeutic area. So we just started this program. And as mentioned earlier, we expect to have data from this during the course of next year as well. So very excited about the pipeline, 3 highly novel first-in-class programs in development with, phase 2-3 development as our sort of primary driver and focus over the next few years.
Yeah, this is incredible. You have a really robust pipeline. If you had to tell investors one thing from a high level here, I mean, you got a lot of data coming out at the beginning, mid through 2023, but what's one thing investors should really fixate on with Equillium?
Well, I think that the fact that there's a huge amount of unmet need across a lot of these indications, and the industry is always looking for novel approaches that can actually really have a huge impact for patients, and we believe all of our programs have that potential based on the underlying mechanistic rationale. So these programs are very differentiated from other drugs that are approved or in development. We need to bear out the thesis that they can be best-in-class approaches, but we have a strong rationale for that. These drugs, particularly Itolizumab, EQ001 and EQ101, have already been through a significant amount of patient experience with good safety and tolerability profiles. We know the drugs are active, so we're very excited about these programs, and we think over the next set of these studies we can drive a significant amount of value in advancing these programs, and ultimately, again, hopefully succeed with our mission delivering life-changing drugs to patients in need.
I really appreciate those insights, Bruce, and just taking the time to kind of go over the deck with us. On that note, I'll pass the question off to the viewers. We'd love to know what you guys think about this in that comment section below. When we come back around, we're going to sit down with the COO and dive down into the financials themselves, the balance sheet, talk a little bit about cash spend and cap structure. So consider subscribing for those updates. But on that, stay cool, stay awesome. And as always, we look forward to catching you in the next one.
Thank you so much.